Christine Barconi with the Brady Bunch here in the NBC4i streaming center for a special episode of Buckeye Breakdown. You're going to be seeing a lot of us this week. We're going to do a stream every single day leading up to the big national championship game this coming Monday. Coach Bill Conley, Jared Smalley, Whitney Harding, Justin Holbrook, and myself. We're excited to have you here. Guys, exciting. We're about a week or less than a week, 6 days out from this big game here. What are you feeling?
Well, I'm feeling pretty good right now.
I
How
was
can you
feeling
not?
great after that game. That was wonderful, huh?
Absolutely. And you know what? We got players right now that are really starting to play their best football. Guys like Trey Sermon, got like Justin Hilliard, and of course our own Justin Fields. I mean, how about this guy? And I think that the timing is right for the Buckeyes. I mean, we're really, I think, really going on all 8 cylinders right now.
I just want to say Whitney called it.
She called a lot of things. She called the tight ends.
Tight ends.
That woman knows what she's talking about.
That's right.
It's like I watch football for a living or something.
I mean, I watch an awful lot, but I'm not that good.
I mean, I think like really what happened was we saw this offense start to really click and find itself. And that's in just so many different areas. And when you bring in those different groups and they play their best, I mean, that's a high octane offense. And I think that's kind of what I'm interested to see in this game is Alabama's defense. It's weird to say it's not your usual Alabama defense. They give up some points and they give up some yards, and it's going to be interesting to see if the Buckeyes can capitalize.
Yeah, I think the big difference in their defense this year, their front seven is not nearly as effective as they've been in the past. As a matter of fact, they only have a couple of juniors on that front seven. The rest are sophomores and a couple of freshmen. So I think that youth has really hurt them in relation to really stopping inside runs and getting a lot of rush on passers and things like that. So I think the Buckeyes have a chance of being fairly successful.
Jared, what do you think is going to be the key component for the Buckeyes to win this game? That's kind of what we titled this the show right now. The Buckeyes and Alabama Crimson Tide, they have different paths to victory. What do you think Ohio State's has to look like?
Health. And it's very simple. Not only Justin Fields' health, how's he doing? I think it's pretty much certain he's going to play Monday. I think the curiosity is how he's going to be affected and how much he'll be able to use his legs as a part of his offensive skill set, because if Alabama doesn't respect him as a runner, it completely changes the way they're going to frame their defense and what they're going to try to accomplish. And the second part is COVID. And COVID's the part that none of us have any clue about for either team getting ready for Monday night. It is the X factor. The one thing I would say about COVID, look, the thing you're going to have to say is right now we are certain it will affect the game in some way. Ohio State and possibly Alabama will not have players that they would have had. It's almost a mathematical certainty at this point that's going to happen with the COVID rates across the country and what's happening. So the question is, who's better prepared to handle that? And I think what you've seen from Ohio State over the last month and a half is you've seen a team that's figured out ways to win when they've had to change personnel. You saw it against Clemson. When Zach Harrison wasn't in the lineup, they moved Baron Browning up to sort of a stand-up defensive end, a creative way to confuse him. Very successful, especially second half. You saw him.
Really good.
Quarterback did a great job. Baron Browning might have a future as a defensive end, by the way. They also played a lot of depth, which they weren't able to do because they didn't have any real blowouts this year in terms of non-conference games. And they're able to get some guys on the field like Cage at defensive tackle. I thought that the offensive line depth is extraordinary. It might be the deepest offensive line they've ever had.
Frankly. How about that freshman, Paris Johnson? Oh my gosh.
Awesome. I mean, there's an all-22 shot of the game where you see him absolutely maul a linebacker.
Pancaked a guy, yeah.
Like, that's just mean. He's a mean man.
Be mean.
So to me, that's the biggest takeaway is health. And it will be a factor, no doubt, Monday.
Yeah, the one thing that I noticed in that game, that hats off to the coaches. Sometimes we don't give coaches enough credit. And I thought the game plan offensively was really, really good. And they really caught Clemson off guard early with their motions and their shifts, the number of tight ends in the game. There was one play where we had 2 receivers in the boundary, motioned the second receiver to the field. Very simple motion. Everybody does it. That's one guy movement. They tried to move 5 guys to that one, and we caught them right in the middle of it, and we hit a crease on a run. And the same thing happened when Trey Sermon made a big run for a touchdown. They were late getting their calls in. We were controlling the tempo, calling plays quick, making quick personnel changes, and they simply could not adjust. And many times they were not set.
No, they were not.
And the big, I think the other thing too.
Plan for a Monday night. Do you think they try to do the same thing?
Oh, they very well may try to do that. I think the key is when you do it. I don't think you want to use the same tempo the whole game for 4 quarters, and they didn't. Ohio State did that. So you change it, and I think the early tempo was a smart move by the Buckeyes. They obviously saw something in the film study that Clemson could not adjust quickly, and they really took advantage of it.
The other thing that stood out to me was just how much better Ohio State was at the line of scrimmage. I mean, you look at Ohio State's offensive tackles on 34 pass dropbacks. They had 0 quarterback pressures and 0 sacks. I mean, that's just unheard of against a team like Clemson. And then you look at the other side of the ball, the way that they were able to not just pressure Trevor Lawrence, but get to him, forcing 3 fumbles, recovering 2 of those. Obviously, they bothered him all night long, and he was not comfortable, only gave up 42 yards rushing. So they made them pass the ball. That's why they had 400 yards passing. And let's go back to the offensive line again, the way that Ohio State ran the ball. Trey Sermon, another big game for him. Offense had 250 yards rushing. They're the only team in college football that is so balanced that they have 250 yards rushing and passing per game. So they just won at the line of scrimmage, something that they're going to have to do again against Alabama.
Hey, guys.
I love that point. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Winnie. I was just going to tell people to send us their questions, but go ahead.
I love that point Justin made about how Trevor Lawrence was uncomfortable because Ohio State's going to have to do that against Mac Jones. He hasn't really faced that kind of pressure that Ohio State can bring this year. And the wide receivers for Alabama, that is kind of the tipping point for this offense versus Clemson. They have so many good receivers and they use them in so many different ways. And the only way you can't stop them. I mean, you're not going to stop Devontae Smith. You're just not going to. But if you can make Mac Jones uncomfortable, then those throws maybe go errant, or maybe, you get some pressure on him and take him down. I think that's going to be so big for Ohio State to try to get this offense a little off kilter for Alabama.
Hey guys, we are streaming right now on the NBC4i Facebook page as well as NBC4i.com. So if you're watching with us here on the NBC4 main page, please drop us some questions and let us know where you're watching from. If you have any questions for Coach or Jared or Whitney or Justin, please let us know. We can hopefully get those answered for you. And for those of you who are watching with us in the Ohio Valley on WTRF's page, I want to say hello to you guys as well. You probably just saw me typing there. If you have any questions, those will be sent in to us as well. So we want to say hello to all of you who are watching right now. Guys, we just heard from Dan Perlman not too long ago that there will be several thousand Ohio State fans in the stadium. It'll be the first time, or not Ohio State fans, but there will be several thousand fans. I'm sure they will be several thousand Ohio State fans. For the first time, the Buckeyes are going to be playing for a large audience. How do you think that's going to impact them?
Well, first of all, it'd be a nice thing, an opportunity for the fans themselves to get out and actually cheer in person. And so anything like that's a motivational factor. But I think the teams got so used to playing in small crowds, only family really have been able to go to games, that again, once the ball's kicked off, it kind of gets irrelevant. I think it's nice for the fans though.
Do you think that'll factor? I mean, it will be, I think, like anywhere between 15,000 roughly people will be there in Miami. So not too loud. Certainly not the hundreds of 100,000 or so that they are used to in the shoe there. We have media days coming up over the next few days. Ohio State and Alabama individually will be talking. What do you guys expect to hear from the players and coaches in that?
If I'm going to judge from the Alabama news conference yesterday,
not a whole lot.
Nothing.
That was such a snooze fest. I'm sorry to say. Like, I rewatched it today and I was like, just trying to stay awake.
I think that's kind of a typical Saban thing.
Yeah, no bulletin board material this week.
Yeah,
No.
I think that this is one of those days or one of those games when you consider the opposition. You run into this in football. There are football teams that are led by personalities, with players with personalities, and they say what they think, and they try to live up to that, and it just kind of stirs the emotional pot, which Bill, we talked about that last week. It was really a bigger deal for the prep for the game, not necessarily the innards of the game, but very clearly at the end of the game, when everybody speaks their true mind, you realize how much being ranked 11th in a coach's poll actually bothered them and how it annoyed them. So yeah, that's all good. That's not happening this week. But the best they could say is Nick Saban ranked him 5th in his poll. That's not in the playoff.
I think what's interesting is he ranked a team that they beat by what? What did they beat A&M? Was it 30-something points? 28 points. He ranked that team above Ohio State. I guess that's a little bit of motivation, thinking that they beat that team by 28 and Ohio State's not good enough to be ahead of them. Maybe.
You'd do it, Bill, wouldn't you? You'd use that as motivation.
Oh, yeah, anything you can use for motivation. Absolutely. I mean, let's face it, the Alabama team's a great team, but I think that us being ranked 5th by him was more of respect to his conference than it was a shot against Ohio State.
Coach, I have a question for you, Coach. Obviously, it wasn't an impact for Ohio State against Clemson that Clemson played more games, but do you think Alabama benefits from having a 12-game season because they played in the SEC, or does it not matter like it didn't matter against the Tigers?
Well, I think right now, because Ohio State is now coming into its own, I think we have enough games under our belt. I wouldn't be saying this if it was the 4th or 5th game of the year, but now we've got more under our belt. So I think you can erase that advantage. But what Jared says is exactly right. It's the health of the team is going to be important. You look at that quarterback spot, for example, in the game against Clemson, Justin Fields rushed the ball 8 times for 42 yards. Lawrence, -8 yards when he tried to run the ball. Matt Jones is more like Trevor Lawrence than he is Justin Fields. So if Justin Fields is healthy, that's a great weapon on the field for Ohio State.
And Justin Fields really stopped running the football, too, after the second quarter when he took that shot, because he had 50 yards going into the halftime, but then he kind of lost a few yards with sacks and whatnot, and they really stopped running him because they didn't need him to.
Right. I think balance is the name of the game Monday, outside of health. It's who can maintain their balance. Obviously, clearly, Clemson couldn't. And, second half of that game, they had to completely, abandon a really good player, Travis Etienne, basically turned into a slot receiver because they couldn't run him. And I think it's a hard thing to do to make Alabama one-dimensional for a number of reasons. Obviously, their talent is elite everywhere. Offensive line, they just won the Joe Moore Award, the Offensive Line of the Year. Devontae Smith's going to win the Heisman tonight. Top running back in the country, arguably, in Harris. Who knows? Maybe Jalen Waddle plays in this game, who we didn't think he was going to play. The healing powers have taken over him. He's going to show up on Monday night, maybe. I mean, talent-wise, this is a hard offense. It's just hard to defend everybody sideline to sideline, Coach. That's what Steve Sarkisian wants you to do. He wants you to defend this way and this way. Every play, somebody's going to be open, and it's up to them to find it.
We have some good questions. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Coach.
When's the last time you've seen this many Heisman finalists in one game?
Yeah.
You're talking a number of explosive players for both teams. It's going to be the biggest of all times. I mean, there's a dozen players that have a chance to take the ball to the house once they get in their hands.
Well, let me build on that, Coach. I remember when I watched Trey Sermon when he was a freshman at Oklahoma when they played Texas, and I said to myself out loud, that kid's going to win 2 Heismans.
Yeah. Yeah.
Obviously, it didn't work out for a number of reasons, right? I mean, Oklahoma wasn't committed to running it the way that you would have to be for a running back to win it. But you looked at him, you saw the talent. That talent has been rediscovered in the last 3 weeks. And you're looking at a kid now that is running with reckless abandon, hurdling players for the fun of it, not because he has to, because he wants to. It's fun. He's attacking defenders, and it is a joy to see. And that's my point, Bill, is that here's a guy that isn't a Heisman finalist, but that talent is in his body, and it is starting to come out now. And that's something that Alabama, if this game was happening 4 weeks ago, they wouldn't have prepared the same way they're going to have to now.
We actually, on that same note, oh, sorry, Coach, go ahead.
This is a game of big running backs. You look at their running back, he's huge, and our running back's big. I don't know what Master Teague's situation is exactly right now, But Mine Williams went in. Now he's not very tall. He's 228 pounds. He's a bowling ball running out there. So this is a game of big running backs.
On that same note, Jennifer, actually, some of our viewers are asking questions. Will Master Teague, do we know if he'll be back into play, and what role will he play versus Trey Sermon, do you guys think?
I can answer that. That is an injury. That is not a COVID-19 situation. It's an injury that was from the Big Ten championship game. So that I think is possible for him to be back. Mm-hmm. But first things first. When you're talking about that kind of an injury, you're talking about player safety by far more important. And so I think what Coach alluded to there, what Ohio State really did is establish Mine Williams as a legitimate backup running back and a kid that is worthy of carries and worthy of opportunities. And heck, I'll tell you what, if he makes that cut to the left, if he doesn't lose his footing, he might score on that play. And that was all in one series. So, I'll tell you what, if the offensive line can keep mashing people the way that they are, they might be able to put me back there and run. Maybe not that bad, but they can run. And they got some guys that can do it. They got them. Steel Chambers is still there. They've got depth there.
Another question from Larry. He said, do you think Alabama might try to exploit the speed difference on the outside against the Buckeyes, maybe to a greater extent than Clemson was able to do?
Clemson tried. And that's the thing is, and Alabama does use their receivers like that. I've been watching some of the film against Notre Dame, and they will put Devontae Smith out wide in the flat, and he'll take off and go. And that is where the linebackers once again are going to be so critical. And we saw them do a great job against Clemson. Now, as Larry mentioned, it is a different kind of speed. This Alabama team, I'm not going to say the wonderful conference speed that we hear so often, but this is Alabama speed. So, especially with the options they can throw out there. I mean, God, you bring back in a Jalen Waddle, that is really interesting. So the linebackers, that middle of the field for Ohio State's going to have to really be ready for those screens, dump offs, that kind of stuff, because these Bama wide receivers can put their foot in the ground and go.
To that point, Jalen Waddle.
Ask you this question.
Yeah, go.
Because of the way that Ohio State structured their defense Friday night. Mm-hmm. Played very soft coverage on the edges in that containment style, right? Trying to keep people in front of you.
Yep.
And so you saw Shaun Wade. In fact, Kirk Herbstreit in the TV coverage, I went back and watched it. He called it out a number of times. Shaun Wade basically bailing on coverage.
Yeah.
And 17 for Clemson turning right there, first down without really breaking a sweat. That was the intent of the defense. Later in the second half, when they started to change their coverage and they're playing more man-to-man, you saw him very physical in coverage. And that's my curiosity, Justin, because I think that is something that they can utilize to keep Alabama off balance. If they change coverages, if they disguise things, they brought corner blitzes against Clemson. That's a lot to think about that, Ohio State's not going to sit in base all day is what I'm saying.
No, they won't, and they'll have to rely on some guys that are going to have another big game. And we talk about Alabama's depth. You can look at what Jalen Waddle does since 2018. He leads the entire country in yards per reception, which is 10. Devontae Smith is second to him. So these guys are not just catching the ball because they're open. They're making themselves open. They're outrunning defenses. So it's like you said, to answer that, you have to switch up coverages. Ohio State is a team that, for the most part, runs a cover 1 or a cover 3, mostly a cover 3. But, like you said, they switched into a cover 1 to try to get a little bit more physical with a guy like Powell on Clemson and to maybe make those Alabama's receivers more uncomfortable because they're not the biggest guys. They have great speed. They have great hands. They're very effective when they catch the ball because they catch the ball pretty much every time it comes to them. But the question is, can they deal with being bullied a little bit? Can they deal with getting open if they're not playing 7 yards off the ball? So I'd like to see Ohio State go back to that like they did versus Clemson of bothering them a little bit more.
I have another good question here from Jennifer. She says she hates the containment scheme, but can it be possible that Ohio State cover Alabama man-to-man?
Bill,
well, I think only as a change up. I mean, you have to mix it up. What we were just talking about. To be successful in a game like this, you can't do what you've always done. You do some of what you've always done, but when do you call a certain defense? When do you call a certain blitz? And then offensively, same thing, when you call certain blitz. So you do things you've done, but you do them in a different down and distance situation or something like that. You just got to mix it up. You got to keep them off guard. Don't let them relax. Give them some things, especially early in the game, they have never seen, to make them be talking on the sideline as coaches to make adjustments. And then you can get back to playing your game.
The good news, I think, from a defensive standpoint for Ohio State, is this is a balance game, right? We talked about that earlier. And the balance games are where you call your linebackers into the most important duty, because they've got to do everything. They've got to defend in the flat. They've got to defend against the run. They've got to be tough in coverage. They've got to be physical. They basically have to do it all. That's Ohio State's defensive strength. And so I think when you talk about defending a team, that gives you great balance, and they're going to bring, the potential run threat on third and medium. They're not just going to put it straight up. That is a team that I think look, it's going to be hard to defend. But in terms of the way that Ohio State's strengths are, Whitney, I think the linebacking core and the way that Justin Hilliard has played lately is such a luxury for them. I think it gives them a pretty good opportunity.
I think it's the depth. It's the fact that it's a variety of guys, right? I mean, there are some bigger linebackers who can, bring that pass rush or kind of hang out in the middle. And then there's some quicker guys who can play out wide, who can work, do well in pass coverage. So it is going to be, once again, the linebacker show. And my question for you, Coach, is Justin was talking about bullying and containment. So how important is a guy like a Josh Proctor out there? Would you want to bring him over to kind of help with Devontae Smith? Would you kind of let him just patrol? I mean, what would you do with that position deep in the backfield?
Well, I think it's obviously down to distance determined. The one thing about our defense is we have really improved at some of the basics of defensive football. That's tackling the open field. We've done better at that. Coverage has been much better. It's been tighter. We're breaking on the ball quicker. And so we're doing everything that a team should be doing to have the success we've had. But we talk a lot about Alabama's offense, but let's not count ourselves short. They have a lot of things they have to defend. They have just as much a vertical threat to defend with our receivers. They have just as much of a running threat with our running backs. Our offensive line is, I think, superior to their defensive line. They're the ones who are going to probably bring some safeties up for better run support maybe than we do. So and obviously we got a running quarterback when he's healthy. So they got a lot more to defend, or just as much to defend as we do.
All right, guys, make sure you stay with us throughout the week. We appreciate all of the questions and comments there on Facebook. We are going to be doing this with media days on Wednesday and Thursday, and then Friday you can join us for another Buckeye breakdown. So make sure you head over to NBC4i.com. We'll have lots of coverage there. Whitney will be on first at 4 with the latest on the Buckeyes, correct, Whit?
Yep.
What are you going to be talking about?
You know what? Give me 1 second.
You're going to be talking about tight ends.
I should. So yesterday we heard from some of the coaches and players. So what I'm going to be talking about is the wideouts for Alabama, because tonight is Heisman night, so I thought we would talk about that. And Tuff Borland really shared with us yesterday how the linebackers are going to have to defend those short passes in that middle of the field area. So we're going to hear from him and from Ryan Day about the receivers. And then later tonight at 11 o'clock, I'm going to talk about kind of how the wide receiver position has changed in college football, and it's become a premier position in the last few years. And Ryan Day kind of breaks that down as to why that's happened in the last few years, and it's become a premier position.
Cool.
Awesome, guys. Looking forward to – yeah, what's up?
But before we wrap up, I just want to make a very important point. Guys, my alma mater, Marshall, is looking for a new head coach. And if you're interested, if you want to apply for the job, just send me an email and I'll shoot you an application. Experience preferred, but not necessary.
Jared, I thought the
football genius who can help us at a small school win a bunch of games. That's all.
Jared,
Coach, what are you doing?
I was going to say, there's a man who I think has done that.
Jared, I'll tell you what, if I get the head coaching job, the first person I'm hiring is Whitney as my tight ends coach.
No doubt.
I get after it, yeah.
Well, Jared,
there you go.
Jared, I thought the governor was hiring that position.
He has no comment. All right. Well, my alma mater probably is going to do everything they can to keep their current head coach for as long as humanly possible. So go Bucks. All right, guys, NBC4i.com, and I will clip this and put that up there shortly. If you are watching, scroll down to read more about the Buckeyes. And if you are watching on NBC, on our Facebook page, click the link in the description of this video to rewatch this. We will see you all week long. Bye.